Man, it's bright in here. Okay. Well, I don't know. I had a couple of questions maybe to direct the conversation.
Michele, if I may, introduce yourself.
Hello. Excuse me. My name is Michele Orrú. I work in the area of zero knowledge, and recently I've been involved in trying to standardize some of these zero knowledge proofs. And so, as such, I think, as we all are, I was a bit worried about these attacks. And with this conversation, the purpose is to try to understand better maybe what are the limits, but also guide a little bit the conversation with some questions that might come on frequently. Maybe also to warm up, one question is like, on a more personal level, what did you learn with this paper? You've both been, working with Fiat-Shamir for a long time, especially you, Ron. And so, what does this paper give you, and how has it changed your understanding? And here I'm talking more at the intuition level, not even, things that you are completely sure of.
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I'll give a bit of a meta answer, but I think it's quite a good lesson to share with others. So I think there was a really good interaction in this work between theory and practice. So obviously I'm coming from a more theoretical background. My collaborators who are really wonderful are coming from a much more practical side. So that's superficially, but moreover, we've known about the contrived attacks for many years, and certainly the theory community was very well aware of this. And I was personally, since we had this paper in 2019, which attacked kind of the Killian type of protocol, and since then I've been very interested in trying to attack real-world protocols. But I never looked at the protocols that we attack, because from a theoretical perspective, it doesn't make sense. This protocol, which is very practical, because in theory land, you don't need to, the point about doing this GKR thing is to commit to less data. You commit only to the witness, rather than more traditional approaches which commit to the entire computation. And in theory land, commit to just the witness, commit to the entire thing. It all goes into a big O somewhere. So, people, I think in that community weren't really looking at this protocol. But in the applied community, what do you mean? Commit only to a witness versus commit to everything is a huge difference. So this protocol became of interest, and that's why we started looking at it. So I think it was a good marriage between the theoretical perspective, which knew that there was an issue, but kind of wasn't quite looking at the right places, and the practical side, which kind of zoomed in on what should the theoreticians also look at.
Mm-hmm. And for you, Eylon, what did you learn with this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, okay, I have to say I was kind of waiting and expecting these attacks of Ron to so I knew all about them, and I was kind of always waiting for the next episode. And actually, in parallel to these attacks, I had a lot of thought of okay, how can we prove Fiat-Shamir for arguments? So with concrete hash functions. So that's something that we focused on doing for proofs and not for arguments. And with all this thinking, my realization was that, okay, if I want to do some Fiat-Shamir for arguments, I need to modify Fiat-Shamir. I need more strong properties. I need to augment my protocol more and change it before I'll get some structure, okay, that I can get. That in proofs we have hard structure. In arguments we don't have structure. So I need to embed this structure artificially. And so I need to change the Fiat-Shamir transformation to give me this structure, and then maybe we can have a Fiat-Shamir with concrete hash functions for the Killian protocol and stuff like that, this gives us snogs that we use in practice. To this date, this didn't give any fruits, okay? However, when I saw Ron's paper coming out, I'm like, this is a real attack. This is worrying to the entire community. I'm like, okay, this is now my message that Fiat-Shamir is not the last word. It's not the transformation. It's the start. It's very simple and elegant, and that's why we all like it. But it might not be the last word, and we need to think of more and more variants of this transformation. And then I'm like, okay, now I have a slightly different goal. I need structure against this attack and not against the arbitrary arguments. And that really helped to close two places in my mind and really come to this paper. And
going back to you, Ron, if you have to think about this solution of maybe framing the problem in terms of a relativized world where there are also these oracle gates. Do you think this is the way to go? How do you feel about the solution? What would be your approach here?
Okay, cool. So first of all, I think Galen and Eylon's work is super interesting, and it's great that, you know, at the end of the day, when you apply it, we don't have an attack. We propose something different with kind of pros and cons. Regarding analysis in idealized worlds, I think I'm going back to the original CGH paper, and specifically there's a part there that Oded Goldreich wrote, which I strongly agree with, which is kind of saying that analysis in an idealized model is fantastic as a sanity check. So it's way better to have this because it tells you about, like, rules out some forms of attacks. But I think for a long time we've been interpreting in this context that security in the idealized model and the random oracle actually implies real security. I think this was very common. And this work shows that it is not the case. And I think we should be very careful about interpreting results in this context. We can talk about other contexts as well. But in this context of general purpose snargs, we should be cautious about interpreting results in idealized model as actually indicating full security. And I think also the specific model, Eylon already touched about it, but the specific model that they suggest is great in the terms of, like, it's geared at addressing the types of attacks that we have. But on the other hand, it doesn't quite capture all of the attacks and some stuff that we would want to catch. So I think there's also, I do think there's good research to be done about finding a more idealized model. But also that even when we get to that, like, idealized model, we should be careful about how to interpret its security.
Okay, thank you. And so...
Can I just add on that?
Oh, of course, yeah, please.
Yeah, okay. So I want to add that, so the actual Ron's attack, okay, the GKR Ron's attack, you have 2 parcels, sorry. So the GKR attack, it's very simple to the attack I described, but then it runs the GKR protocol. So it gives kind of a proof on this function H, okay, a non-trivial proof on a concrete function H. And to do that, it actually needs the code of the function. It goes layer by layer and does it. If you try to mount this attack to the relativized model, where we only have oracle access to H, so the circuit can have oracle access to H, and then the toy example that I showed works out, but you cannot run the GKR part, okay? So I cannot take the GKR attack as is and mount it to our framework, to our model. To do that, I would need kind of a stronger model that allows to do kind of GKR types of computations, either a algebraic model or something else. That would be very nice to kind of border the things, the family of attacks that do not work, okay? And actually point us to new attacks that might work. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that for proof systems, we have this long line of work that shows that, okay, there is some implementation, maybe not practical, of a hash function that makes the Fiat-Shamir transformation work, okay? Even if this is not practical, it still shows you something important. It shows you cannot do this type of attack where you're saying, for any implementation, I'm going to attack. Because we know there's one that doesn't work. So if you want to attack these proof systems, okay, that do not use these impractical hash functions, they use something practical like SHA-256 or something, that you need to exploit the specific structure of the hash function, okay? That seems much, much harder. For argument systems, okay, things that start with commitments and stuff like that, which is what we use in practice, we still don't have this kind of parallel results of some impractical hash function that suffices for Fiat-Shamir. And I think that would be like another strong indication for security. So at least you know that you cannot have these general attacks that, you know, any white box implementation, and all these attacks are in the same family, like any white box implementation works. So I think that would be another like parallel effort in kind of...
So the heuristic assumption would now be not that we're replacing an idealized hash function by a practical one, just like we're replacing an impractical hash function that provably works with a practical one, and I think this is a good direction.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you. Well, and now that we are talking about these assumptions, Ron, you've been working for a long time on this line of work that tries to do Fiat-Shamir in the standard model, and you didn't talk about it during your talk, and so I was curious if you could maybe give us an understanding of what are the core properties that you try to get when you try to instantiate it in the standard model, and what is the ingredient that allows you to have this property, maybe?
Sure. So it's a relatively recent line of work from like I think 2016 or 2017, in which we show that some work by myself and some by others, but we show that for some protocols you can actually compile them using Fiat-Shamir with a concrete hash function in a provable way. This is what we're talking about. The key dividing factor, which Eylon also talked about, is that the protocol that you start off with is statistically sound, meaning that it's sound even against an unbounded cheating prover. And for that scenario, it turns out that there are ways, which actually took the community a long time to come up with, to provably instantiate Fiat-Shamir. These protocols are more restrictive, so we've been able to extend it to even beyond only statistically sound protocols, but only to an extent. But nowadays we have like beautiful theoretical results, but showing, so for example, snargs for P. So you can prove the correctness of a deterministic computation. There's a very expensive computation that takes time t to compute. You can provably using Fiat-Shamir, you can actually prove it though, and to verify that runs in pi-logarithmic time. The catch is that you're only able to do it for deterministic kind of problems in P. It's only computation. It's not. There's no exists a witness kind of thing going on. So that's kind of the limitation. We've gone past that a bit, but that's where this line of work stands. And yeah, so it's a huge open problem also in the theory literature to extend it beyond.
And just to make sure, they could also plug also in sort of the Fiat transformation in the way that we use it today. It's just about building something around it.
Yes. So it's designing protocols for which you can prove stuff. The application of a Fiat-Shamir, there are some levels of nuances, which maybe this is not. So it's at the high level definitely it's the same. At the lower level, it's you need to be a bit careful about how you do it.
Thank you. Going more into the sort of standardization dialogue, I've been now working for many years on standardizing Fiat-Shamir and Sigma protocols. And in particular, one of the things that I realized while doing Fiat-Shamir is that it has not really been proven or precisely described. And also thanks to the extreme patience and rigors of Ale, we made a paper that's just out of the press, 2025-536, I think, in terms of the print report. But we try to prove the security of Fiat-Shamir going all the way down to what's inside the hash function. There is a duplex sponge construction. And so if we look inside, there is a permutation function. And as long as the permutation function is kept as an oracle, this ideal permutation model, we are able to prove things secure. And so I guess the question there is that this oracle there still leaves room open for attacks, right? Mm-hmm. But I guess, is there any way in which this analysis can sort of help you maybe rule out some attacks, but also on a more general level, knowing that there is a hash function that's done in this way, it's not about anymore proving maybe that for any hash function the system is secure. Right. It's more about this specific instantiation. And so how do you feel about this possibility? Right. Would it help you? Would it be more difficult because now it's as a fixed block thing?
So maybe just to spell out what you're saying, because it's a particular form of hash function, it actually kind of potentially makes the life of an attacker easier, because it doesn't, in the current diagonalization stat attacks, we have results of the form, we can break it no matter what hash function you use. If you restrict the family, then there's potential that could be beneficial. And I think it's really important to look into that. I do have a feeling that some forms of hash function might have convenient structure that would help attack somewhat. In particular, if you if you do something like Merkle-Damgard, you operate in distinct ways on different parts and don't immediately mix everything together. It smells to me beneficial. I don't have any concrete attacks in mind. Mm.
And if you had to think about a transformation that does Fiat-Shamir in a secure way, do you think this is still the right way? We should try to formalize how to do sponges, or do you think we should take a step back and try to see on a more general level, like what is the formalization that needs to be done there? What is
Yeah,
the
I'll
right
first
model?
comment that, okay, so this is what I tried to reference at the last slide, that this analysis with duplex and permutation and these sponges, one thing I would like to see is the XFS transformation analyzed with our new analysis of our transformation together with actual sponges and these implementation. And one reason is actually we add like more and more things to the hash. We add this solution for the strong proof of work. The solution is not like 100 bits. It's a bit big. So like a sponge construction would work on it. So actually it would be very interesting to see kind of what actually happens there. I think that's a good question. Yeah.
Nice. And going forward with the standardization process, maybe one last question is like, do you feel like these attacks can be mounted on Sigma protocols and specifically like Schnorr proofs for representation, so something more complex than just Schnorr signatures? Like, what's your worry there?
Can I start?
Like,
so I have I think, something positive to say and something negative to say. So I'll start with the positive. So I think there's really a dividing line in the way that we're currently applying Fiat-Shamir versus how it was done in the 80s or 90s. To me, it seems like the more traditional applications where you take some like specific Sigma protocol based on some like Schnorr's protocol or something very concrete, and you apply Fiat-Shamir. I have no even beginning of an idea of how to give a concrete practical attack against something like this. And like the dividing line is that in the modern way that we're using Fiat-Shamir, we're applying it to protocols that are meant to prove correctness of a general purpose computation. And that's what sort of lets us try to reason about the Fiat-Shamir hash function inside the protocol. And that is a cause of a lot of havoc. So in terms of my gut feeling, I think applications for Sigma protocols for concrete things, I feel much more comfortable than the general setting. So that's my state of mind.
it's relieving because we have like 6 RFC drafts that I use.
So having said that, I do want to touch upon the general purpose computations because it's not something theoretical anymore. There are things that are being run and protecting, Eylon said, billions of dollars, which I think is quite true. And I think like Eylon sort of predicted this cat and mouse game. And I just want to emphasize that I'm very concerned about a potential cat and mouse game because, I mean, currently with this attack, we attacked a particular protocol that a few companies were using. We're attacking a particular circuit that looks like, but is not quite what's being proved. So, like, I don't know how to, generate money from, like print money or like prove, do like a real world attack. However, I think if this cat and mouse, I think even that like one iteration of a cat and mouse game. So if something like our mitigation against attack or Eylon's mitigation, Eylon and Gal's mitigation against the attack are broken, then I'm not sure that I see it like a dividing line between GKR versus like Starks, like Fry and so on. So I'm quite worried about the potential. So I think like, if there is an attack, we'll probably be able to come up with mitigation, but these are systems that are being run, and I don't like the idea of an attack against them.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that. So we have this Fiat-Shamir transformation, and as we apply it to like a more and more complex system, it's like more vulnerable. Okay, and that's where ones come in, and he has all these attacks. We look at the Fiat-Shamir for like very, very simple Sigma protocols like a Schnorr protocol, kind of don't see a way of attacking it, and we have some hope maybe we can actually prove stuff. Something that kind of came up in our work is that kind of roughly what happens in our proof is we say, let's take a Fiat-Shamir for some simple system and bootstrap it to a Fiat-Shamir for a more complex system. So the security of the Fiat-Shamir or some transformation for the more complex system relies, or boils down, has a reduction to attacking a Fiat-Shamir on a very simple system. And I think that is a very promising way of kind of extending security to more and complex functionalities.
Yeah. And
maybe we can add questions from the crowd.
of course.
Oh, big question. You
Nigel?
can, yeah, you can
Nigel's
shout,
mark.
right? Wait, no, but you have a...
Who I think was one of the people that did the first letter to NIST about we need to standardize DKPs, no?
Okay, maybe, yeah.
Say your name.
Oh, yeah, I'm not... the voice gone now. It's Nigel Smart. Two very cool talks. Really super cool. And the attacks were really cute in that you had this really simple circuits, both of them. And you called Ron for people to come up with proving more false statements. So I'm kind of interested in how did you invent this attack? How did you come up with that simple circuit in the first place? What was your thought process doing this research? Because that would inspire other people to come up with similar attacks on other things. Because you kind of pulled it like a rabbit out of a hat.
Yeah. So this is a bit of a shorter version of the talk. So I have, I think there's an online version of a talk that I gave at Stanford that gives like a toy example, which is somewhat similar to Eylon's toy version. I think even simpler. But really, like the main thing is know the literature. And I think the previous works on the contrived examples were very much in my mind. And it seemed like a key thing is to be able to predict the Fiat-Shamir randomness. And I was working on trying to, this didn't just like pop up. I was working for many years trying to break stuff like Killian's protocol using like an actual PCP or IOP. And it was always the case that like the circuits, we were trying to attack verification circuits that were very shallow. They were just doing like a conjunction of low degree tests, and you couldn't like fit in the Fiat-Shamir hash function. And when we were talking with Lev and Dimitri, we started like thinking about protocols that we can attack. And when realizing that people are using GKR and you have the entire circuit that you can do it, that sort of led to an attack. But really the key point thing to keep in mind, and I think the potential for extensions is via diagonalization. So know your diagonalization. I think the CGH paper is an amazing paper, so it's really good to look at that. I think, for me, in terms of next steps, the thing I'm concerned about but don't know how to do is so currently, all of the attacks need for the circuit to be able to compute the Fiat-Shamir hash function. If we could mount an attack in which all that the circuit needs to do is verify a Fiat-Shamir hash function, as we all know, verifying is much easier than computing. So you'd be able to do with much simpler circuits, and I think all of the mitigations that we have would break if you could do something like this. And I don't know how to do it right now, but that I think that's what I encourage people to think about.
Food for thought.
We have all the way there, and then you.
Hi. Have you thought about what sufficient conditions there are to prove that a circuit isn't vulnerable or backdoored?
So in terms of proving, I think you're going to have a difficult. So there is like a question of like, what are obviously bad things for it to contain, and we see that containing the Fiat-Shamir hash function is risky business. That's what you don't want it to contain. In terms of proving, what you would need to do is like show that for circuits of this class of circuits, the transformation Fiat-Shamir works with some particular hash function, and we're very far from proving things of this form. You could think of like some maybe intermediate step of like for some circuit family in the ROM, things still work. There you have sort of like two things you should be concerned with. Does that make sense? So two things you should be concerned about. If you're doing the Fiat-Shamir hash function, it's a major concern. But we also have in our paper these non-adaptive attacks in which the circuit actually doesn't contain the Fiat-Shamir hash function. So what it does contain are things of the form of like universal computation. So that's another thing you should beware, but it's also very useful because like, if it's there, it's because you need it. So these are two things to be wary of, and I think we're pretty far from being able to prove.
I'll also comment on that. So I think it's actually a very interesting question to try to characterize the actual protocols that we have deployed and we're using and show that they satisfy some property that we'll call kind of non-contrived. And we should try to make them different than kind of the contrived examples. And then if we really have some nice property, we can say, look, this is actually a natural property. All our systems, satisfy it. The contrived examples do not satisfy this property. Then we can say, okay, let's try to prove security of a Fiat-Shamir transformation for natural protocols that satisfy this nice property. And that might be an easier task than trying to prove security for like all circuits, right? All verifiers, all everything, even contrived things.
So in a sense, that's what this line of theory literature has been able to do, right? We show that for some protocols, we can make it happen.
Yeah.
My question is related to the first one. I'm lacking here the theoretical background. Maybe it's a stupid question, but how, for example, the mitigation of expander, how is it proven that you can't represent a certain hash function?
Nothing is proved.
With this?
It's, so again, to repeat, what is their mitigation, which we propose it in the sense that we don't know in attack.
No, I mean just the statement that there is no circuit of certain depth.
Yes, absolutely. So that's like so among other things, we are conjecturing there that there is a circuit of so the hash. We're implementing the hash function in a particular depth, and we are conjecturing that there is no smaller depth that does it. And these are things that we are very bad in complexity theory at proving. We're very good at conjecturing them. But not proving.
Is it supported by the security analysis of the hash
Sorry?
function? Is this kind of intuition supported by the security of the hash function itself? Like when you apply Boolean solvers, and you try
So in particular, think of taking your hash function and composing it with itself. And suppose your hash function was computable in depth D. Then when you compose it, you can compute it in depth 2D. And I feel comfortable conjecturing that you should not be able to do it better, but obviously it depends on the hash function, and I can cook up a hash function for which you can. They are, basing their current security relies on the fact that you cannot do it for Poseidon. If you repeat enough Poseidons, there is no speed up or speed up in terms of depth. So that is like a kind of a complexity theoretic conjecture that you can make about the hash function. I think I don't think that part is unreasonable, but it is a concern.
I would be a bit cautious about this. So if you remember, the reason we needed this very strong proof of work is exactly because in order to to mount this attacks to succeed, even for kind of an H of H, hash function, you kind of need to be able to compute the Fiat-Shamir hash function only on one input and even with very small probability. Right? We want security 2 to the minus 100. If you have some probability 2 to the minus 70 to actually be able to compute this H of H in less depth, then the attack would work. And we do not want that. So kind of formalizing, you're asking, is it secure? I would say you have to be cautious.
Absolutely. I want to second that. And also, even if you're only approximating the hash, I would be concerned.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Just to make sure how much time we have left.
We have 3 more questions.
Okay. And there is also the gentleman on the black coat. Yeah, okay, good.
Okay. So thank you for the great talk. One of the things that you mentioned, there was this quote by your dad, which basically can say that the mileage of an idealized model can vary, right? They are a good sanity check, but they are not really the full story. Right. On the other end, we've known for a while that in the theory thing, there are limitations of what we can prove about certain arguments. There's things that we know, this Genscher-Weeks lower bound. So in a sense, my question is, what up is there? What can we we can try to prove things for limited class of computation, P, UP, and all that kind of stuff. But then there's the idealized model are really the only thing that we can try to get to. And there's this kind of gap between what we can prove in the idealized model and what we know we cannot prove for things that we care about is stuff in MP. So the question is what is the hope?
Okay, so I can try, and maybe if others want to add as well. So I think for me, the hope, which I think is very ambitious, is to try to prove in the plane model, and that's what I would like to see be done. What Giacomo is mentioning is that there are also like negative indications that it's going to be very, very hard to do this. So there are papers stating theorems of this form, in particular work by Craig Gentry of FHE fame and Daniel Wicks of all kinds of fame. However, their paper, there have been all kinds of ways to kind of navigate around it. So I don't view it as a showstopper. I view it as making things very hard, but not a showstopper. So I do think there's potential. That's what I would hope for. I am not happy with settling for idealized model security. For the moment, it seems hard to go beyond that. But
I have two questions. One is probably a little more personally motivated. When it comes to being like safer, like in terms of designing, would you say that constant round protocols, like Ligero and Sigma protocols, are safer than non-constant rounds, the ones that go log-n or beyond? And the second question is, we usually don't deal with circuit models when lookups are involved. There are RAM. There's like, our model of computation is more RAM. So does the attack change, or like, can you view the attack still even for ones that use lookup arguments?
Right. So the first question was about like whether I think that the round affected. Indirectly, yes. So we're using like GKR, which is a multi-round protocol, and we're leveraging a particular property that GKR has, which is like not committing to the entire transcript, which you cannot do if you have a constant round protocol. So in that particular sense, we would definitely need a new idea in order to attack a constant round protocol. But sort of if you take, I think like, I mentioned as an open problem, if you can mount a similar attack against GKR in the case in which the circuit being proved is more shallow than the Fiat-Shamir hash function. If you do something like this, then I think things like Ligero, like Starks, in my eyes, they look exactly the same. And I would see no, so really for me, that's a dividing line in terms of like the cat and mouse game. I think if the cat goes into this like next layer, then I think a lot of protocols that we use might be exposed, including constant round protocols. The second question was about like circuits versus like VMs or RAMs and so on. I think it's a good question. Like VMs, as you know, and as I'm also working at Succinct now, so no, VMs are more complicated to deal with and making life as an attacker harder. Circuits, you have more control. To me, it feels a little bit of like, it's only, when you make things messy, it's harder to reason about them. I don't think there's like a core thing that makes them safer. That's my feeling.
Yeah. Hi, can you comment on the widespread usage of recursion in some of these generalized VMs and circuits as well?
Eylon, do you also want to respond? And I can also add.
Yeah, I'll say a few things. So, yeah, there's a lot of use of recursive composition of proof systems. And there's a question of, what happens to the security? So you start with one system that has some security, and then you kind of do recursive composition, and maybe you do a tree of recursive composition, and it's deeper and deeper. And the question is, what happens to the error, right? What happens to the security? Does it degrade with the depth? Does it degrade with the size? So that's a good question. In the most general theorem, actually what we know to prove, the security actually degrades, right? So if you have kind of a rewinding knowledge type of security and you're doing recursive composition, then security slowly degrades. However, we do have some more recent work showing kind of that if you have a stronger security notion in some relativized world, or if you have a straight line extractor or stuff like that, then you can do a much more tighter analysis and you don't lose in this composition, and you can virtually show that you don't lose security when you're doing recursive composition. So I would say that it depends exactly on what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess.
Sorry, let's stop here. Thank you again for this discussion and going deeper into these topics. I think we all learned quite a lot about the attack and and how it affects our world. Thanks again.